Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever and whenever you're joining us from. My name is Johanna Ransmeyer, and I would like to welcome you to the first in a series of 4 public panels presented in conjunction with the University of Chicago's Human Rights in China course that Professor Teng Biao and I are teaching this spring quarter. Teng Biao is visiting us as Posen Professor at the Posen Family Center for Human Rights, and I'm a China historian. This panel is sponsored by the Posen Center, the History Department, and the Center for East Asian Studies. Today, Teng Biao and I are joined by 4 distinguished guests to discuss the ongoing atrocities against Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims in Western China. I will introduce our panelists all together now, and then turn back to our first panelists with some broad framing question to launch our conversation. So Ilshat Hassan Kabore, our first panelist, is the director of the Chinese Affairs Department of the World Uyghur Congress and the Chinese cultural consultant of the Uyghur Human Rights Project. He was born in Gulja, East Turkestan, Xinjiang in Chinese. Mr. Kokobor graduated from Dalian Tech University in 1988 with a major in chemical engineering. For 15 years, he worked as a language and chemical subject lecturer at Shiheze Vocational Teacher Training Center in Shiheze City. In 2003, he fled political persecution in his homeland and ended up first in Malaysia and then finally managed to arrive in the United States in 2006. Shortly thereafter, he joined the Uyghur American Association and has become one of the most active and influential figures in the campaign for Uyghur human rights. Ms. Zubaira Shamsiren is Chinese Outreach Coordinator at the Uyghur Human Rights Project, the UHRP, a documentation and advocacy group based in Washington, D.C. She has been campaigning for the human rights and political freedom of the Uyghur people since the late 1980s. She currently chairs the Human Rights Committee of the World Uyghur Congress. She's worked in multicultural education and community liaison activities for nonprofit and academic, governmental and non-governmental organizations in Australia and the United States for over 2 decades. She was a 2016-2018 fellow at the Center for Women, Faith and Leadership of the Institute for Global Engagement, has a bachelor's degree in library and information science from East China Normal University, Huadongshi Fandaxue in Shanghai. She has a certification in Chinese from the Industrial University of Xinjiang, a diploma in Russian language and literature from the State University of East Kazakhstan, and a graduate diploma in information studies and a master's degree in international studies, both from the University of South Australia, where she focused on the modern history of Uyghur human rights. Magnus Pizdestro was educated in his native Sweden and at the University of Chicago, so we're welcoming him back. He received a joint PhD in anthropology and in East Asian languages in 2000. Before that, between 1985 and 1991, he served as the Swedish embassies in Beijing and in Tokyo. And from 2000 to 2005, he was director of the Museum of Far Eastern Antiquities in Stockholm. Since 2005, he's taught anthropology and Asian studies at Cornell University. His research interests include ethnic relations, ethnopolitics, and heritage issues in East and Southeast Asia, based on research in China, Taiwan, Burma, and beyond. Tursunay Ziawudin is an Uyghur native of East Turkestan and a camp survivor. She's a person of remarkable bravery, both in what she has endured and in her willingness to share her testimony of her own experiences, as well as her understanding of the inner workings of the camps. She will be assisted in her presentation to us today by translation from Zubaira, and then after Ms. Ziawudin's remarks, I will turn the floor over to Teng Biao. Finally, Teng Biao will be familiar to many of you. He is an academic lawyer and human rights activist. He was formerly a lecturer at China University of Political Science and Law and has been a visiting fellow at Harvard Law School, Yale Law School, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, New York University, Hunter College, and Harvard's Carr Center for Human Rights. Teng has defended cases involving freedom of expression, religious freedom, the death penalty, Tibetans, and Uyghurs. To raise questions today, this will be familiar to those of you who've been in webinars in the past. There's a Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. If you'd like to ask, to identify yourself, please feel free to share your name and any institutional affiliation. But if you wish to ask a question anonymously, you may of course do that as well. Most of you are coming to this session with a bit of background and an interest in this already. So please excuse me sharing some things that you may know already, but I will before I turn the floor over. Xinjiang has of course been throughout its long history, a place of strategic significance and anxiety for China. It's situated as a gateway between China and Central Asia. It has a culturally diverse population and it has been critical for overland trade from the time of the Silk Routes to now with China's Belt and Road Initiative. The region is rich in desirable natural resources. It also constitutes 1/6 of the PRC's total land area. In the past, different regimes have handled ethnic policies toward language, identity, and religion with approaches involving varying degrees of colonization, multiculturalism, integration, and assimilation. We have witnessed in the past few years a sharp shift toward a much more aggressive and violent form of repression, perhaps starting from the riots in Urumqi in 2009, with Xi Jinping's 2014 visit to Xinjiang, or with Chen Quanguo's appointment and Strike Hard campaign that he launched in 2016 and escalated in 2017 till now. So to turn the floor over to Ilse Kapur, there are 11 million Uyghurs who make their home in Xinjiang, East Turkestan. Today, we have reliable research based on satellite imagery, examination of the PRC's own records, requisition orders, photographic records, interviews with local officials, and survivor testimony, documenting that there are as many as between 1 and 2 million people held in camps there. As a starting point for today, I'm hoping you can share with us your perspective on the expansion of this system of camps, what the PRC says it is doing, what is actually happening. And I know that your own family's struggle goes much farther back in time than the timeline I just outlined. So perhaps you'd like to share that as well. And so I turn the floor to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm honored today here with so distinguished panelists and together. My first city was in US when I came to US as a refugee in 2006 was Chicago. So it's back to the Chicago. Thank you and everyone. This few days since last week was very difficult for me, especially personally after the New Yorker journalist Rafi published a long article, and in that last part it was talking about the lady. She's out from the concentration camp in Quayton. She was with my two sisters in that concentration camp, and my elder sister Ilnor was get arrested in 2014, 15th of August. Just because she is a single mother, I always try to support her. So before 2014, 15th of August, I sent him a few times money transferred. And also I sent her daughter, because she was in university, a computer, laptop, and which all made the Chinese government targeting my elder sisters at first. And of course, before that, I fled my hometown in 2003. And in 2004, 27th of November, my brother was the only brother, younger one. He was killed in a restaurant in daylight time by a group of Chinese mob. So the report last week in New Yorker was talking about my sisters. And I remember before publishing that article, the journalist Rafi called me and told me, Elshad, you probably will know some more about your sister in that article, and better I will let me talk to you a little bit more. And he was talking to me about my second sister. She was passed out a few times in the flag raising study in the concentration camp. And because her husband and elder daughter and also my elder sister was there, 4 of them in one concentration camp. And when the others tried to help her, the police dragged my sister and then beating others, not letting anyone to help my sister. And it is very painful. I remember when I was talking to Rafi, I was in my office in Annapolis. After I dropped the phone, I cried a long time. And it's a helplessness. It's very painful. My both sisters speaks well Chinese. Elder sister is a nurse and graduated in a medical college. And my younger sister, she was graduated in the Chinese school, vocational railway station training school. And she was working for that railway station. And all never ever happened to say anything about the government. And my family basically paying for my activity. And actually, when I get out from the university in 1988, I was expecting some reform in China and we can get more autonomous. And I never imagined I will be on the other side of the Chinese government, and the discrimination, the prosecution of the Uyghur, assimilation of our culture, restriction of our religion. And today is the Ramadan's first day. I just break my fasting before this seminar. And I remember it was first time in 92 or 93, this college I was working and announced any teacher cannot fast, cannot pray. And it was directly to a few of us, because whole college, we only have 5 or 6 Uyghur other than all is the Chinese. And they were intentionally telling us. And specifically, I remember the party boss come to me, say, Elshad, I know you are a little bit religion, so you can't fast, you can't pray. And this was the beginning. It's openly against our culture in the after reform. And step by step, when I try to defend my rights as a citizen, and they push me step by step, and then before they get me assassinated, they will try to make up a accident, and I run away. And that is my story, part of. And the real watershed in the Uyghur modern history is 2009, the 5th of July. After that, the Chinese government openly said Uyghur is an enemy of the Chinese government and needed to be assimilated. This was openly in the Tiwei and the research paper of the Tsinghua University, Huangang, Marong, Beijing University. And then in 2014, actually the concentration camp started popping up in a small scale. Until the Xinjiang come to become the party boss in East Turkestan, then the concentration camp started to expand. And in the beginning, the Chinese government called it Re-Education Center. Re-Education Center. And then when we find out, we start to expose it to the world, the Chinese government said, that is education center, but it was small scale. Then in 2017, they switched first time to say it the vocational training center. And then in 2018, early January, the governor of the Uyghur Autonomous Region, Shugret Zakir, say it was a boarding school. This is the third time they changed the name. And then in 2019, they openly say this is de-extremism and de-radicalization school. And basically, they were acknowledging they are holding the people, but they never acknowledged how many of the people they are holding. And with the estimate, it should be in more than 2 million. And we don't know exact number. But with expert scholars and some others study, it is very close to 2 million or more than that. And this concentration camp, I would say it wasn't something new to the Chinese system. And if we have a little bit knowledge about communists, and it was, I would suggest anyone who can read Anna Applebaum's Gulag, a history that was started from the Soviet Union. And then the communist China copied it. It started in 49. And in the beginning in East Turkestan, it was called nationalist labor camp. It was targeted to the Uyghurs National Army's officer, the East Turkestan government's official who are persisting for the independence, pursuing for the independence. They were resisting the Chinese colonization, and they were targeted, and they were sent to the labor camp. In 1953, 54, 55, this was continued. And the Cultural Revolution, it was continued. And then it was changed the name, but it was still existed until Professor Teng Biao and his other friends, they tried their best to abolish the one. It was called Logay. But its name was changed, but it was still existing. Now it's become spread to the whole East Turkestan, and even include my family. And I currently only know my elder sister, second sister, my second sister's husband, and my second sister's elder daughter. They're in the concentration camp. My mother, I lost contact in 2016. The last phone call with her was late August. Since then, I don't know if she is alive, and I don't know where about her. And I have a younger sister. She has 2 kids, and I don't know whereabouts of them, if they are still alive. And my elder sister's 2 kids, I don't have any information, and also don't know whereabouts. And my second sister's younger daughter, I don't know whereabouts. And I have uncles and their nieces and nephews, they're all disappeared. Basically, I was cut off with anyone in other side of the world. And it is probably for others not easily to be understood that how much we are suffering. A lot of time we are talking about the concentration camp in East Turkestan. Actually, we are living in outside. We are also in concentration camp. It is a mental concentration camp because our life totally changed since 2016. We don't know any one of our family member. If they are alive, if they are in concentration camp, what is the condition in concentration camp? And when I heard my sister was passed out, and she was dragged in, and especially when I heard some of the torture, rape, and I am just try myself to stop thinking anything. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm sure we will have questions. I'm going to remind our listeners that unlike at a real-time forum, you don't have to wait to ask your questions. So if something occurs to you, you can post in our question and answer button at the bottom of the screen. And I'll take advantage of this moment in the transition to Zubaira Shamsidan to direct a question to her. And again, a reminder that you don't need to feel constrained by my question and your remarks. Watching even from the standpoint of Western media, there's been a kind of progressive unfolding of the government's dismantling of Uyghur life. And recently, we saw that the editors of textbooks that the PRC state and the CCP had previously endorsed have now been sentenced to death and imprisonment. There are many esteemed Uyghur intellectuals held in prisons and camps today, including individuals that the state once valued as cultural treasures. So I'm wondering if you can speak to us a bit about the impact that the suppression of intellectuals has had on culture throughout the region and for the Uyghurs in particular.
Thank you, Joanna. It's for your kind introduction, and it's just fantastic for me to be here today. Let me just focus to what has happened to Uyghur intellectuals and what's happening and how it impacts Uyghur life. I just wish to focus on to your question. Dear friends and colleagues, it is my honor to be here, honestly, at the University of Chicago online event today to talk about the Uyghurs and their unfortunate fate. Being among the students reminds me of my times in academic institutions, which were some of my favorite places in the world and where I originally wanted to be. When I was little, my father used to tell me I should either become a teacher or a linguist. When I asked why, he said both professions are helpful for humanity. They help open up people's minds. He added, language solves misunderstandings and the teaching mobilizes humanity to seek knowledge. Although the Chinese government has persecuted my father and all my family members since 1949, their minds and souls stayed unchanged. Even accusations of being a rotten intellectual, a poisonous religious person, and an enemy of the Chinese state did not deter them. Instead of telling me to fight with the Chinese authorities, he told me to learn languages and become a linguist. Language learning can solve the misunderstandings between Chinese and Uyghurs. Teaching can spread kindness, knowledge, and fairness. My father was still caring for humanity, other humans, rather than for himself and his family, despite the hardship he was still living through. So this is us, the Uyghur people. In East Turkestan, the academy was controlled and managed by the party. For Uyghurs, this meant we were preferable as loyal servants for the CCP rather than pure academics who could contribute improvements to the society. If we are too successful in the academy, we would become targets or blacklisted in code nationalists. I became one in that category simply because I questioned why the Academy of Science in Xinjiang operated differently to the Academy of Science in Shanghai. The crackdown on the Uyghur people didn't ease despite non-stop dissatisfaction towards the government policies. In fact, it has gotten worse since Xi Jinping took power. He has turned the Uyghur region into a high-tech surveillance military state, where 1 to 3 million Uyghurs and other ethnic people are locked up in concentration camps. According to Uyghur Human Rights Project, which is our organization, since April 2017, the Chinese government has imprisoned, forcibly disappeared, or sent to re-education camps at more than 500 intellectuals as part of its intensified assault on Uyghurs. 5 deaths in custody in this period have been confirmed, but the true number of intellectuals who have died in the camps or died immediately after release is unknown. Dozens of intellectuals are also serving harsh sentences handed down prior to April 2017. The so-called re-education camps are, in all respects, extrajudicial prisons. According to survivors, the intention of this type of detention is to psychologically re-engineer the Uyghur identity until there is no evidence of Uyghur left in the world. We have reports of political indoctrination, forced denunciation of religion and identity, highly unsanitary conditions, abuse, and torture. The sad thing is a lot of these detained Uyghur intellectuals could have helped the Chinese government create the stability in Kyiv it so desires. In a 2014 New York Times article, Dr. Rahila Dawood, one of the most prominent Uyghur anthropologists, said she was concerned about the rise in women wearing full head scarves and veils, in line with China's government concerns. She has now disappeared for many years, her whereabouts unknown. The last poem the famous poet Chimangal Awad wrote before being taken into a camp was a short message to her son on her social media. Read in Uyghur, Can Qozam, jığlımığın, sen üçün jığlar jahan. That is, my dear lamb, do not cry, the world will cry for you. There are over 400 more documented stories like these. Who knows how many more we have not heard about. In fact, the very first groups of people who disappeared into re-education, so-called re-education camps or university students who had been studying abroad and forced to return home. We do not know if they are dead or alive, or if they have been sent to mainland China as a factory forced labor force. At least one is an American resident who should have been in the middle of his PhD at MIT now. If the surviving students and academics ever leave the re-education camps or concentration camps, will they be able to continue in their fields after experiencing such soul-crushing horrors? The crackdown on Uyghur scholarly society is a dangerous and concerning phenomenon. The impact of this cruel action by China will be generational. Losing these scholars is the same as losing centuries of generational knowledge passed down from mother to daughter, from father to son, from teacher to student. Knowledge of history, science, literature, art, the very core of what makes human culture. Without them, Uyghur society will suffer losses, the magnitude of which are incalculable, but sure to run down generation. My colleague, Henryk Krzyzewski, draws a parallel to his native Poland in an article he published in February 21st, 2019 in Los Angeles Review of Books. In it, he says, in 1939, the Nazis implemented a policy that singled out Poland's intelligentsia. Selected people were targeted, disappeared, and murdered. The aim was not only to cleanse the newly conquered territory, but also to wipe out any source of opposition to Nazi rule. Professor Jan Pakulski writes that these, in the quote, eliticides resulted in the formation of a politically dependent and socially deracinated, in quote, quasi-elite with limited capacity for governing. In order to prevent even worse from happening to Uyghur intellectuals, efforts by the international community and especially from academic sectors are crucial. Therefore, I would like each one of you here and anywhere in the world should act now before it's too late. For students or anyone in the US, I would like to ask you to write to the US Congress to support the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. Here in Illinois, Senator Tammy Duckworth and Senator Dick Durbin have not yet co-sponsored this bill. Please ask them to co-sponsor it as soon as possible. Please also write to Nike and Zara to stop making profits from Uyghurs' forced labor in the cotton fields of my homeland. Please ask the University of Chicago if it is profiting from the Uyghur genocide. Chinese surveillance companies are advertising facial recognition software for racial profiling of Uyghurs. Some people call it, in quote, Muslim tracking software. Please check whether the University of Chicago endowment includes shares in these 3 companies, Huawei, Dahua, and Hikvision, then please ask your university to divest from these companies. And if they get any profits, they should donate it to help Uyghur refugees and survivors. Finally, please follow Uyghur Human Rights Project on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You will see many more action steps you can take. It is at Uyghur Project. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sabira, for all of that. And we have questions coming in Q&A, which we'll collate for the end, but I will take my moderator's prerogative and direct my transitional question to Magnus Vizgescu. You've written about the role that programs of self-denunciation and self-criticism within the camps have played in destroying and dismantling ethnic identity. And I know you're going to talk to us today about a broader swath of this. So I'm just going to say, if you can say more about why this is so effective. You note, of course, this is only one dimension of what makes the Chinese innovation on how to expunge a culture insidious and devastating. So I look forward to your presentation elaborating on this and ask you also what more we should know about how the PRC plan for the Uyghurs is unfolding.
Thank you so much again for having me and for the question. I'm so honored to appear together with my colleagues here. Can you hear me all right? Yes? Is it working fine?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. You asked whether the erasure of identity in these camps is something that, why is it so effective? And I started thinking, I'm actually not totally sure that it is effective. And it goes, I think the heart of this question is whether one can really destroy somebody's identity through these measures. And I have a few slides I would like to show. I think that it is possible that some people could survive and come out still with their sense of self as an Uyghur person, with an identity as an Uyghur person. But it's very difficult. I think from the Chinese point of view, these camps are something that they enforce because they think it would be effective. And for them is also a spectacle. We have now forced millions of people through these procedures. And that's a statistic for them that means success. So whether it really is, I think the jury is still out. If I may, I'd like to share my screen and show you a few slides. I feel that I'm elaborating on what Ilshad Kokbore and Subaira Shamsudet already have talked about, how these camps function as a tool of genocide. And this is what I want to focus on. And I think this has not been enough appreciated in the mass media. Often people will think these camps are merely about punishment, and they talk about them being educational, re-education, that's just fake. But I think that they are a key tool of the genocide, precisely in terms of the destruction, the intentional destruction of Uyghur identity. So that's what I want to move to talking about. The Chinese government, since 2016-17, as we have already heard, they have mobilized a whole range of measures that are all coming together around destroying the identity of the Uyghur people and transform them into Chinese, into loyal Chinese, obedient Chinese. So to me, it is an intentional genocide because it is meant to destroy the Uyghur nation as such. And in this context, the camps have a key role. Here's a couple of pictures that the Chinese government themselves published early on, thinking it would be only for domestic Chinese consumption. But when they noticed that foreigners started seeing these and taking note and piling them into the mountain of evidence that started to accumulate about what they were doing in this area, they took them down. Now journalists can only go about this far, or even not even this far. They cannot get inside. What we know from the inside of the camps come from eyewitnesses, such as Tursunay that we have with us today, and others who have testified about their experiences. This is an example of someone who made drawings of what they experienced inside of the camps. And there's a long list of accounts like this. I want to note that when the regime couldn't hide this vast new camp system that they built up in 2016-17 and are still expanding, they built a few pretend camps, showing them to gullible foreigners, hoping they would mistake them for the real thing. And they started talking about the vocational training and boarding schools and so on. But they made interesting mistakes. Here's one on the right side here. You see in the BBC film from one of these foreigner stage visits, a man named Akbar Ebeidullah, who used to be an official in the city of Kashgar's Department of Cultural Heritage. He was an intellectual. He was awarded prizes for good work. He had studied at university. He speaks fluent Chinese, English. He's not somebody who needs vocational training. Why would he be thrown into a camp? Why was he here? Friends of his that knew him and who are now in exile in Turkey said that it was that once he was too proud when telling foreigners about Uyghur culture. And this is a very interesting clue. What I think the Chinese government is after is to break and destroy this pride, which is part of your identity. What do the detainees actually do inside the camps, the real camps, not the pretend camps? Well, prominently, as was mentioned already, they have to denounce themselves, their past, what they've done in the past, their religion, their practicing religion, their culture. They have to give up their language. They can't speak their own language inside of the camp. The other side of it is that they study, quote unquote, it's about parroting the party line and documents in Chinese, all to confirm that they're now loyal Chinese. So this is a procedure that actually is derived from forced identity conversion procedures in Eastern China and now applied massively to convert people's ethnic identity. That's why I try to call them ethnic identity conversion therapy centers, if anything. This is a rare moving film, Smuggled from the Inside, showing inmates being forced to sing a communist song before they can have food to eat. Why is this going on? It is, as I said, an ethnic identity conversion procedure, which is meant to undo aggressively, quickly, inside of the camps, the existence of Uyghurs as such. Meanwhile, outside, in the entire society, this same kind of forced assimilation measures are being taken. You have to change to Chinese habits, Chinese holidays, Chinese food. Kids cannot speak their language anymore, etc., etc., etc. In the camps, this is accelerated very aggressively, and any misstep is punished. And I have gone through a lot of interviews with people that have been published, and found here is just a couple of samples. One former detainee said that, well, we were made to discuss our own problems. For such and such a reason, I'm here. That is, you can imagine a person who's been locked up inside and who's forced every day to stand up and denounce who they were in the past, what they did in the past. Yes, I went to the mosque. Yes, I was proud about being Uyghur, etc., etc. The second quote here is about how they were taught to denounce their own religion. Your religion is not what you think it is. And the detainees would be made to swear it off and tell our thoughts, he says. That's exactly the procedure against dissidents in Eastern China, to force people to say, I was wrong, I'm grateful for being corrected. But here it's about ethnic conversion. And this is extremely traumatic, because this is targeting who you are as a person. So the two last quotes on this page, they talk about how as a witness to people who have seen people that they knew who have come out from these camps, and they change fundamentally, quote unquote, as if something inside them has been ripped out. They walk around with their heads down. This is telling you about this massive trauma that's been done to you if you're locked up inside and made to denounce yourself for months and months and months and months, and not allowed to speak your own language and so on. So if you come out, you're like a robot. You'll seem to have lost your soul. You're like people who lost their memory after a car crash. This is people struggling to find the words to describe the massive trauma afflicted on those people who are inside. And here we can really think about the question that Johanna raised. Can you survive this? I mean, many people will be psychologically damaged and hurt, traumatized by this in a very serious way. We can see this is very evident. But I think it's also possible that some might be rehabilitated and come back if they are allowed to. One example of something that's very interesting for me as an anthropologist is this example of the very common everyday gesture that people have when they have a meal, just like Christians might say grace at a meal. Uyghur Muslims and other Muslims in this region, they'll make this gesture at the table. Here you see grandma doing it with their little granddaughters. This is a very fundamental thing. You learn to do this, it becomes part of you, it becomes part of your identity. Then when you get locked up in the camp, this is criminalized. If you do this out of habit, they'll beat you, they'll lock you away, they'll punish you, and say that you're a terrorist. This is the level that they have sunk to. And there's a spiral of violence that where guards will commit more and more violent acts just to stand out. But the key thing here is that because the goal is to break people by targeting their identity, here they target things they have learned since childhood to become a good person. If you're a good person, you say grace at dinner. So to me, this is a very powerful illustration of what it is that the Chinese government is trying to do. And this is extended to the kind of cultural figures that Zubaira was talking about. This is a very famous pop star, the Uyghur Justin Bieber, he's called sometimes. He's disappeared. Well, why would you disappear him? He has this very powerful music video still up on YouTube, and nothing has come up after 2016. But here he's singing about kids that are very proud because they're Uyghur. He's singing about kids that are Uyghur and modern. Well, the Chinese narrative is that Uyghur means backward. To be modern, you have to be Chinese. But here's a song produced when that was still possible, saying that you can be both and we can coexist. And for that, he's being taken away. That's what this genocide is about. And Zubaira talked about the hundreds of cultural leaders who have been disappeared. And I'd make the same argument. Why take all these people? What are they being punished for? Well, to me, it's because the Chinese regime is targeting their pride and what they stand for as part of the identity of the people as such, which is what the regime is out to destroy, which is genocide. Now, this is a genocide by forced assimilation. And it's something that led by this communist chief in Xinjiang, who's in the East Turkestan area, who's under the command of the top leader of China, Xi Jinping. What struck me, and I'm working on an article about this, is that this whole project is very similar to the project led by the Nazi governor of occupied Prague in the Second World War, Reinhard Heydrich. He was also out to force assimilate the natives in their own homeland, which they had occupied. What he planned to do was to Germanize the Czechs and others in occupied Europe. And then if they didn't Germanize, they would be enslaved or expelled or killed. And when you think about this Nazi project, you see that this genocide by forced assimilation, it was targeting people in occupied Europe across vast regions, millions and millions of people. So actually on a much larger scale than the attacks and the destruction of the Jewish people and other smaller minorities. This is about majorities in their homeland. That's very much comparable to the Uyghur situation today. Yet, of course, the Nazi-occupied Europe, in Nazi-occupied Europe, this project was only started. They lost the war, so they couldn't finish it. In China, it's ongoing right now. Thank you very much. Here's the reference to the article I wrote on this topic and to my bibliography hosted kindly by the Uyghur Human Rights Project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Magnus. So now we turn to Tursney Ziwudin, and I'm going to ask Zubaira to help me with translation from my brief introductory question, and then Zubaira will help convey Tursney's remarks. So to Tursney, thank you so much for being here and for the strength and resilience that has enabled you to survive. I think listening to Magnus just now, even in the global large scheme, we get a sense of just how heroic survival is in this kind of a context. I read in a translated interview that you did, that you stated about the camps, that they say people are released, but in my opinion, everyone who leaves the camps is finished. And because you're able to be here today, we're so grateful that you as an individual are not finished and that you're able to talk with us. And so I invite you to tell us more and also to speak directly to our students about what they can do, possibly elaborating a bit on what Zubaira has also shared.
Tursunay, bugün bize kelip katılganlığınızdan aytı hoşal bulduk. Men siz toğırlık sizinki nemege bergen akbaratlarga bergen sözleringizni eşitdim, kördüm. Onunki bäzi bir yerden wagtda o lagerga, jaza lagerga kirip çykkanlar, kirgendikin çykkandikin manda aytkanda tügüşidi, yani tügeydi dep. Aşındaq yezilgan hem aşındaq gepler deyilgen. Siz şu tüggen degenlerning içinde tügümey mushundaq bugünkü künde özüňiz kelip bizge sözlüginiňiz bu bir naýt bir kahramanlyk bir jasaret. Şundaq bir kahramanlyk bilen kelip bugün biz bilen birle oturup özüňizniki ahwalyny sözlüginiňizden biz naýt täsirlendik, hem naýt hoşal bulduk, fähirlendik sizden. Şu bugün meýerde köýgenler siz özüňizden bevasta sizinki şunda bir kahraman alda turup atkanlygyňyz, yani jaza lagerden sak çykyp mындай aytkan wagtda tügeş emes, belki ýani gaýtadan kahramanlyk göstermişdik kelgendigiňiz üçin siziň özüňizniň agızdan ahwallaryny aňlaşyny haýdy. Rahmet, hazır sizge söz berimiz.
Assalamu alaikum. Emmalar menden rahmet. Men sizler bilen muşun anlaştırıp görüşkünümü hoşalman.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. I'm very happy that you invite me to join here and be with you today.
Men asli şundaq bir men deýmem. Hayatımda şundaq nurgun işler bolgan bolsun. Burun men asli özümni şunçilik hoşal külüplü turgan hahmamyz aştaq daýtdym. Sen ajap bir fakat bir hapağonyňy kömeýtdik dep aştaq kızdım bilmeýme. Hayat şundaq özgerdi hazır küleýdisem külenmeýdigan iş kılıp fakat iş kılıp şükürem şunçilik tuğunumga. Lekin aşaqdyklarning şunçilik üni bolalygymga özümni ýana hoş his kılmay rahmet. Sizlerge sizden gap berişiňiz men.
Thank you. I used to be a kind of really open and always smiling person, but I completely changed it later. But still, I'm glad that I was able to be alive and come here and join you and also be able to share my story with the world. And thank you. And right now, I just wish you to read out my remarks. Now I'm just going to read it. Men okupyrman, this is Lincoln okupray. Okay. Okay, so this is Trusnay's story, because instead of translating one by one, we just wrote it down. So I'm going to read it out now. I lived with my husband in Kazakhstan for 5 years and returned to my hometown in November 2016 for medical treatment. 1 month later, the authorities confiscated our passports. We tried everything to get our passports back. And the authorities finally told us that if I would stay as a guarantee, my husband could go to Kazakhstan to take care of our business matters. In April 2017, the government told me I would have to go to school in Kuwait for a month. This was the first time I was sent to a camp. The conditions were not too bad, and after 28 days, I was released due to medical condition, illness. In February 2018, I was taken to the same place, but it was reconstructed to be like a real prison and horribly overcrowded. I was tortured and witnessed the torture of others. After 5 months there, I was told why I was there, for having stayed 5 years in Kazakhstan. They cut off our hair, and we were handcuffed and shackled and frequently taken for interrogation. They gave us unknown pills and injections. There were women who were inside for 1 year, and during that entire time, they never had the monthly period. Women were taken to the hospital and given operations so that they no longer could have children. I was also taken to a hospital for this operation, but because I have always suffered from a gynecological condition, the doctor said I could suffer complications that include death, so they spared me. At the same time, women in the camp were not given medical treatment that they needed. Even elderly ladies in their 70s and 80s who couldn't walk properly. Eventually, the guards started taking women out of the cell and told them they would be charged with crimes. The poor women cried and screamed in horror, but the guards didn't care about their pleading. Some women received sentence of 5 or 10 years. Elderly women were crying out, asking, what is happening to my life now? How can I spend 10 years in prison? What life do I have left? What have I done to be given a prison sentence? They cried so helplessly. We all went through all kinds of abuse. Camp officials would come in the middle of the night and take women away. They would shout, get up and come with us. And after that, we would never see them again. I later learned that several people died in the hospital. I was finally released in December 2018 when I got back to Kazakhstan 6 months later. My husband and I agreed that we had to tell the world what was happening. I told my story to a Kazakh human rights group, Atajurt, and some foreign journalists interviewed me. But even then, I didn't tell everything. I kept silent about being raped several times. It was too terrible to talk about after I was first released. I didn't want to cause even more pain for my husband and my family. I was finally able to reach safety in the US last year, and I decided that I had to tell the full story of what happened to me. With Uyghur Human Rights Project's help, I gave an interview to the BBC. The story finally came out in February this year, giving clear evidence of systematic rape in the camps. The whole world was shocked. Even Uyghurs and Kazakhs suffered a terrible emotional shock. Before the BBC report, people were hoping that maybe rapes were not common, that maybe their sisters and the daughters were not subject to systematic sexual abuse. But the BBC investigation destroyed that hope. I feel destroyed, but I feel I have to fight to keep my soul together, because I must alert the world. Please stop these atrocities. If you are observing Ramadan, please pray for Uyghurs and the Kazakhs and donate to Uyghur groups for your zakah. If you feel the suffering of people like myself, please take immediate action. Do what you can to stop the genocide against my people. Finally, please follow Uyghur Human Rights Project on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You will see many more action steps you can take there. Thank you.
Swarsene and Subaira, thank you both very much. I am going to turn the panel over to Tangbya for a moment as the final panelist, with a broad general question of, having discussed all this, what else ought we to know? And I'm going to also mention a question that came in on the discussion board. Sort of, what can you tell us about the reaction in the Han community to all of this, either abroad or back in the PRC? We have a question on the discussion board that comes in from someone in, oh, it may have gone into the answered column. Maybe you answered it. Someone from in Hong Kong asking about why this was something the CCP wanted to carry out. Why is this happening? And my elaboration on that question would be, what do we see the CCP doing recently to try to counter the news of what is going on in Xinjiang? So the information campaign that the government in China has generated around this issue is also something that perhaps you could speak to, and that also addresses some of the questions that have already come in on the discussion board. And again, while Tangbya is talking, please feel free to post more questions. We'll keep an eye on those as they come in.
Okay, thank you very much. I was always moved every time I heard the testimonies from my Uyghur friends. And as a Han Chinese, I am so sorry for what you have to experience for so many years. I may talk a little bit about how the Chinese Communist Party feels they want a more severe crackdown on civil society, and actually everything. For everything in the civil society has been surprised since Xi Jinping came to power. Of course, before Xi Jinping took office, the human rights lawyers and dissident activists, NGOs always had the trouble. But Xi Jinping kind of changed the political and social landscape, and he started a comprehensive crackdown on like lawyers, journalists, media, universities, and underground churches. So the reason is the Chinese Communist Party seems to be very powerful and very confident, but actually it's facing economic crisis and the conflicts between the people and the government, the corruption, the environmental disasters, and its own ideological crisis. And on the other hand, the Chinese human rights movement, the civil society, gained more and more support. In 1990s and early 2000s, there was a kind of a process of liberalization, even though the censorship was always there, but more and more people, the intellectuals accepted the idea of a Western-style liberal democracy. And then the Chinese Communist Party regarded this as a urgent threat to the one-party rule. Then that's the social and political factors behind the comprehensive crackdown. And even more, the Chinese authorities had established and strengthened the what I call high-tech totalitarianism. The Chinese government uses like DNA collection, the health code, the artificial intelligence like facial recognition, voice print recognition, and social credit system to tighten its control on the society. And Xinjiang is the perfect example of this kind of high-tech totalitarianism. And the Xinjiang model is being expanded to other provinces. By the way, UK professor, the author of a Perfect Dictatorship, said like most Western scholars describe China after Mao Zedong as an authoritarian system, but the case of Xinjiang that made him change the idea. It should not be authoritarian system. It is a totalitarian system, and so the ongoing genocide in Xinjiang is the worst humanitarian disaster in this century, and it has economic, ideological, and cultural aspects. But the biggest reason might be the political calculation by the Communist Party. The number one priority of the CCP is to maintain its one-party rule, and so the issue of Xinjiang, it has a different language, different culture and religion, and it used to be an independent country. So that made the Communist Party, worry about the regime. And so the purpose of this genocide is to maintain its political monopoly of power, but the method is to eliminate the culture and religious identity of Uyghur people and other ethnic minorities. And the CCP incited and exploited the nationalism sentiment of Han Chinese people. So I think the Han Chinese people should re-examine our Han chauvinism and the racism. Many Han Chinese people don't realize the privilege as a Han Chinese, and the Han Chinese dissidents and the human rights activists feel the fear of being fired or monitored or arrested, but the other Han Chinese people don't have that kind of fear, and Han Chinese don't have the fear, the isolation, the desperation that every Uyghur experiences in Xinjiang, East Turkestan, like the fear of daily discrimination, the fear of elimination of culture and religious identity. And Ilishad said the overseas, even the overseas Uyghur people are put into the mental concentration camps. That's really horrifying. My Uyghur friends told me they don't know any Uyghur who doesn't have at least one family member in the concentration camps or disappeared. And in China, most Chinese people have been brainwashed, and they kind of agree with the Chinese government that the fight, the concentration camps is to fight terrorism, extremism, or separatism. And many Chinese are trapped by the nationalism. They have a strong feeling of the great unity, the 大一统, the supreme unification. So so it's the CCP's propaganda machine and the brainwashing system are very, very powerful and effective. So for us, for the world, the most important thing to stop the genocide is to raise the awareness via social media, the traditional media, like the clubhouse. We know the stories that so many Han Chinese people and other people are shocked by these stories, and we should continue to tell these stories by organizing panels and events and conferences. And I involved in the setup of a website talking about Xinjiang.com, and we give ideas and suggestions to the people who have connections with Chinese people, but it's not easy. One Chinese citizen in Urumqi, Li Lin, was sentenced to 4 years for his 5 tweets critical of Beijing's Xinjiang policy. And we know recently Chinese government sanctioned many foreign think tanks and scholars and Congress people. And some people were sued by Xinjiang firms and the intellectuals. And Australian citizen Vicky Xu Xiuzhong has been severely harassed by the Chinese authorities. So yeah, that's I can stop here. And one thing is, we should link the Uyghur genocide to the Beijing Winter Olympics, and I think that's a powerful tool we should not give up. Thank you.
Thank you, Tong Biao. There are a couple questions about the efficacy of linking the Olympics and whether or not that is a good strategy, or whether it should be an all-out boycott, or just individual athletes, or send the athletes but not the money. And if you're interested in that issue, we can talk about it if the panelists want to speak to it, but we will have another panel later in the quarter that also talks specifically about the Olympics. So watch your inboxes and your Twitter feeds for information about that. I'm noticing that in the Q&A, there's a question that John Weiss of Cornell directed to all of us. Magnus answered it a little bit, but I'm going to share it with the rest of the panel and specifically ask that Zubaira and Ilsat perhaps think about the second part of his question. John asks about being sure that we expand the identity of the people who are being erased to include Kazakhs and other non-Han, Uzbeks, Turkics, other people in this space who are getting swept up in the situation in Western China. And then the second part of his question is about whether or not there's the potential to coordinate among refugee and resistance groups, I assume meaning across ethnic lines. And I know from my own awareness of coordination, even within the predominantly Chinese community, it's sometimes difficult to get people on the same page. So as two people who've been in the exiled community for some time, do you see potential in coordination with beyond the Uyghurs, with other non-Han groups and various forms of resistance that might be available, or coordination of in the overseas community? And I guess Ilshat and then Zubaira, or in whatever order you'd like to take it, whoever wants to go first.
Okay. Thank you. Good question. Actually, we already coordinated with others before the reform. I would say Uyghur, Kazakh, and Kyrgyz, Uzbek. We never differentiated us if you are Uzbek or you are Kazakh. I was educated in a Uyghur school for 3 years, and half of my classmate was Kazakh. We were same teacher, some Kazakh teacher, some Uyghur teacher. We still study, and I was living in a Wulja, a mountain village. So we were together. So we don't have any problem. And after the reform, Chinese government intentionally uses a divide and conquer strategy until the 2016. And then they rounded up after I'm assuming the Chinese government thinking they already settled the Uyghur issue, now come to the Kazakh, Kyrgyz, and Uzbek, even Chinese Muslim, the Hui. So now we are coordinating with Kazakh and with Hui and also Uzbek. Pretty much other than the Hui, Uzbek and Kazakh, we were all filled. We are same in one category. We are Turkish and we speak almost same language, cultural sharing, everything. But now a lot of Hui also standing up, speaking for the Uyghur. And even actually we were already extended some communication to the Chinese community. Peng Biao is our long-term friend and also a scholar from the Chinese side. And we worked together so much, so long. And not only Peng Biao, we also have some Chinese. And I mean, we got very strong support also from other community. So yeah, we are doing that and we are improving. And we try to, sometimes we have some small issues there, but we did figure it out. We are coming more close and close. Thank you. Zubaira, please.
Yeah, I second Ilshad's points. I think in terms of coordination among the Turkic people, I don't think there is a big issue because, yeah, as Ilshad said, we kind of grew up, so we never knew that, you know, the people is who's Kazakh, who's Tatar, who's Uzbek, or who's Uyghur, because we just grew up together. So not much differentiation. Although, yes, the Chinese government used and divide and rule strategy against the Turkic people, but I don't think it was really kind of successful because no matter what, because we are culturally, religiously, linguistically almost same people. So it's very difficult, I guess. And also, not only Uyghurs, other people also face the exactly same suppression by the Chinese government. You know, as long as you non-Han, that was the main target. You know, the Chinese authorities, the main task and the main strategy is just to use Han nationalism against ethnic people. So with that, somehow there are kind of very strong connection among the Turkic, and many Turkic people knows that and understands that. So that's one key thing. And in terms of other coordination with other groups, I think I am very hopeful, although it took us to kind of stage of genocide to get together. But I'm so glad that, you know, people kind of realize that what has happened to us could happen to them next day, and which is happening. Like whatever happened to Uyghurs and in East Turkestan now already exports to mainland China, and it is already happening in Hong Kong, and now Taiwan is under threat as well. It's exactly the same political hegemony, and also all over the world, not only just stopping in Taiwan, Southeast Asia, even in Africa. So what China's government's ambition is not something just to finish up with the Uyghurs, not just the Uyghurs, not just the Kazakhs, or not just the Uzbeks. It is a bigger picture. I think not only just us, I mean, it's something to do, whatever we're talking about is just not only, yes, genocide is very serious and very horrific term as well as the action. But by the looking at what Chinese government is doing, it's not something that can stop just there. So not only just those people groups should be coordinated and act together, the world should coordinate and act together, I guess. Otherwise, tomorrow will be very dangerous, because we have been through all, and all the Chinese government tried to deny everything and spreading disinformation, misinformation. But through those disinformation, misinformation, you can see the truth. Like why Chinese government is so eager to dispute about, you know, every story, every witness testimony. Like for example, as Ting Biao mentioned before, the Chinese government foreign ministry is taking pictures of Trusnai Xiaodong, I mean, and also the Zumrat Daud, yes, Vicky Shu, many people's pictures, and in the foreign ministry is standing against those individuals, you know, specifically targeting female. Those things tell us a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Building off building sort of off your response, and then also off a question on the discussion board, it's easy to imagine natural alliances that form both from historically the melting pot that Xinjiang has been as a wonderful multicultural place, and then the natural alliance in the exiled community. Zubair, you describe China with great ambitions for control, and there are questions on the discussion board about the Belt and Road Initiative. I'd like to weave the question about whether or not what's happening in Xinjiang and how it's related to Belt and Road, which anybody can answer, the question of that relationship, together with a question about whether or not any of you have insights on why it's so difficult for Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims within China to get more support out of Central Asia, out of the what should be the natural ethnic allies across the border, and maybe the role of Belt and Road in that, you know, taking us a bit out of the tragedy in Xinjiang and looking more at the international scope. And I don't know which of you is the best person to speak to that, but Zubair, your question sort of inspired me to ask it. So
yeah, I think I can start. I can begin, definitely. I'm sure Magnus as well as Ilshad can add more. I think right now, in terms of this question, I think the economic, the relationship is, or, you know, money matters, talks much louder than human rights issues, I guess. And especially in Central Asian countries and many Muslim countries that are economically so dependent on China. I think they are prioritizing the national interests, I guess, just, you know, country interests than before human rights, or even relationship with the brothers, sisters as well. Yes, we are ethnically the same with the Central Asian countries, but because of economic relationship with China, they try to be silent, or they're afraid of stand up. But unfortunately, I think China is abusing that kind of relationship to put more pressure on those countries to silence them. And it is happening to other Muslim countries as well. And that's the reason, you know, that's why China's government is easily able to say that whatever happening or whatever happening to Uyghurs and the Uyghur crisis is something Western conspiracy or even American conspiracy. But the one, on the other hand, what Chinese government is just exploiting other countries with the economy. That's the kind of relationship that I see. So those countries should overcome from that kind of suppression. Even this is kind of tactics that what Chinese government has done with many countries. I mean, Ting Biao, I think a little bit touched on that one. Yeah, that's the reality, unfortunately.
Add to Zubaira, I feel another one reason is Central Asian government all is after the Soviet collapse, and they never had a chance really to modernize the government structure and also to be more open society and democratize their country. The NGO and the press freedom all not existed in those countries. There's still like in some degree, in some country, is like a mafia running a group. So with this, only it benefits elite group. So the Chinese government tried to use their bribing corruption technique to control the upper class, and they don't care the lower class, whatever they have. That's why we can feel the brotherhood from the lower level, from the people, ordinary people. But when it's come to the upper scales, then it was death. I was talking to one Kazakh activist. He is very active, Hakikat. He is a musician, and we exchange a lot information. And he is telling me, and actually in Kazakh governments, inside the government, have the worry about the China, their infiltration. And one hand, they try to let this camp survivor to do more demonstration in front of the Chinese embassy. But at the same time, some group of the upper class was worried that China will really to come to severe their economic support or whatever. And then they also try to keep a little bit balanced with the Russian, the Central Asian government always playing the balance, the old imperial left over the big game. They try to play that old game. So that's why they are constrained by themselves, the delusion, I would say. And also the old system, it didn't work for the modern society. And there are people also crying. So in this case, I don't think they can, only if US government invest more and to encourage the civil society and also encourage the openness of the whole society and freedom of the press, then probably they will have gradually can stand up against the Chinese. They have the worry, that's real. And what I heard from the Kazakhs in Kazakhstan, they had some high-level meeting with camp survivor, but they were also have some worry. Thank you.
Magnus.
Jump in? Yeah, just a footnote. Thank you so much. I was heartened the other day. I read about an independent public opinion survey in Palestinian areas. We have read about how the Palestinian Authority officially signed on with the Chinese government's party line about this. But this opinion poll said that 80% of the people don't believe it. They don't believe what the Chinese government have said, and they want to stand in solidarity with the Uyghur people. So I think that illustrates dramatically how in many places you might have a government do one thing for the reasons that Ilshad mentioned, but the public opinion might be something different. And I think that also shows that how important it is for all of us to try to get information out so that people can make up their own mind.
I have a student from our class who's asking a question that I'd like to direct to Tursane, I think. It was one of the earlier questions asked, but it reminds me a bit of some later questions that have direct references to Nazi Germany. But this student asks, when the camps started, that the term he uses to come online, but when those camps began, what were the thoughts of those inside the community who were not detained at first? And Tursane, in your comment, you mentioned your first trip into the camp it wasn't quite so much like a jail. And then it was like when you were brought back, it was even more like a jail. So I'm wondering if you could tell us anything about the kinds of conversations that people were having about this as it was starting before it was where it is now. And anybody else can also answer, but I thought it'd be nice to hear from Tusney.
Sorry, I'm going to translate to Tusney since you point into it. Tusney deydici mağolqi. Mesela siz mi dediniz ki dastlabki sizin lagerga dastlabda apağan vaqtda u chaqdagi lagerning ahvoli o'xshamaydi dedi. Hamda bu yerga bir o'quvchi savol so'rayapti. Uning savolida deydi, o'sha lagerlar dastlabda boshlangan vaqtda shu boshlanayotgan vaqtlarda lagerga tutib akatmagan xalqlarning ichida o'sha lager haqida qandaq nima so'zlar bor deydi, qandaq gaplashishlar, qandaq so'zlashishlar استخلابات deydi. Lager haqida, lager dastlabki vaqtlarda. Undan keyin ikkinchi qitim sizni opag'aqda lager butunlayla o'zgarib turmida ko'p ketib ekan deb shundaq dedingiz deydi-chu. Shuningga shu lager haqidagi lagerga akatmagan yoki so'lamaganlarning orasida qandaq gap so'zlar bor deydi lager haqida. Dastlabida ham keyin.
Dastlab birinchi qitim meni tutib qolgan vaqtda men sirtdan hech qanday xabarlashaolmadim, lekin men chiqqancha hamma odamda mundaymiz bilinmay xalqlarcha nimaga akatganini, hatto meni chet elga chiqqan, masalan, unda ma'lum birinchi qitim tutgan vaqtda bular haramga bordi degancha cho'nglar. Haramga bordi, chet elga chiqdi deb pasportlarni ilib, ashta bir yurish kirganda ba'zilar bilinmay bu chet elga chiqqanlarni qamagan o'xshaydi, ma'lum fransiyat odamlarning ashta bir jinoyati bor o'xshaydi. Shundaq bir xatolik o'tkazib qo'ygan o'xshaydi degan bir nazarda bo'lib qoldi-da xalqlar. Ular ashta bo'ldi.
Sorry, I have to interrupt. Otherwise, I won't be able to translate in full. But I don't want to miss any information. At the beginning, even I didn't know myself. When I was taken, I thought that many people thought that just they are detaining people who have traveled to overseas, who applied for passport and had passports, or whoever traveled, especially to the Hajj and to Mecca for pilgrimage. So that's how, at the beginning, that's what people thought, simply because people traveled, and that's why the authorities wanted to detain them, and somehow the authorities saw those kind of people as suspicious and they should be detained. That's what I thought.
Hatta mening o'zimmi ashta o'ylab menga uni degan o'qimaganlarni o'qish deb kirdi-ku, o'qiysizlar andaq deganki, hammamizning nazarida ashta o'qiymiz va bir kirib ashaga o'qimaganlar, asha xitoycha til bilmaganlar, masalan, til o'rganib chiqadigan o'xshaydi degan bir nazar hammamizda bo'ldi. Lekin ikkinchi qitim kirgan vaqtimda hammasi o'zgardi-da, boshqacha bo'lib ketdi.
And also, top of that, we thought that they're going to take people who are illiterate and uneducated. So they're going to educate those people and teach Chinese those who don't know Chinese. And also, the many people assume it is kind of a school, so they can get education. So people who are going to be taken there will be kind of illiterate or uneducated people. And that's how people thought. But however, when I was taken a second time, it was completely different. It's not the case. It's not the case that someone just simply because they're illiterate or uneducated and they can gain education to get something else. The case was not like that. It was changed.
Lekin biz birinchi qitimmish kiriblam bir hafta qolmayman biz bildikda, bizni rasmiy dars o'tib bizga ashtaq nima qilmaysan, namoz o'qisanglar bo'lmaydi, bu xato, din yo'q, bu kommunist partiya mushu degan sizlar xudo yo'q danglar degan darslarni o'tdi bizga rasmiy. Shu chaqda berib bu nimishdi deb bir xil hayronlik bo'ldikda biz, bir nima bo'lib ketgandi degan bir ichida biz bildik, teshliklar unda o'ylimda o'qish kirgan deb o'yladi. Ikkinchi qitim meni kirgan chaqda u chaqda rasmiylar sirtqilarmi biz men bir mazgil sirtib turdim, bilib rasmiy biz endaymiz sirtlarda nima uchirdik, Rasmiy ашкарла sizlarni qamайды, bizni qamamaydi deb Xitoylar bizga ochiq deydigan ashda holat yetdik-da, ikkinchi qatim kirgan vaqtimda ashda.
And also, however soon I was taken, just after a week, I have realized that, and I felt just completely confused and felt really strange because we start to get kind of education that, you have to denounce your religion, we have to completely ignore our religion. And they would tell us that CCP, Chinese Communist Party, is a god. There is no God. You shouldn't believe in God. You shouldn't believe in practice religion. And that was kind of so horrific and strange education that we should be getting. So, and then I realized soon, just 1 week that after staying in the camp, I realized it's not something to do with just education. However, the people only who were detained, we realized the detention is nothing to do with education or nothing to do with other people. But however, the people still not detained outside the camps, they still think that we were sent for education. They still think that the camps are schools. However, the second time, and I realized it's completely something different. And we even, when second time began, and during that time, even outside of the people, we clearly heard, Chinese people said, we're not going to be detained, but you, Uyghurs, you people will be detained. So from that time onwards, we already realized that the target of detention is us, the Uyghurs.
Мен hayran қалдыған бір ішіне дегім келеді да, мұш кісілер әмді қандақ, бұлар қандақ көз қарашты болды ашынанғы білгім келеді да, менің бір өзімнің hayran қалдыған бір іш, тешідім тудым, мен іштедім 3 жыл тудым ашақта, лагерь башланғанда мен Қазақстандан бері 3 жыл жариянында тешіді, 1 жылдек, 2 жылдек тешіді тудым, әтті шу мәзгілді менің ұшырған нәрсем, әтті менің өзімге лагерден шыққан деген, аштақ деген. Мен оның ішінде бір немеге hayran қалдығым, оның ішінде бір Қытай, бір башқа ханзул милтетін көмідік та, біз оның ішінде Қытай жоқ. Фақат қазақ, ұйғыр, башқалар. Шыққанда әтті өзімізге бізні кәмістіп жо, ашында қайдық. Немдейміз бір. Бүйек әргіз сілер кірсілер, сілер нем қылды деген кәпін очық дейді де. Bir xil bolumuz, bir aram bolumuz, onun işçidimi xudu bir qıgan hareketleri şundaq buyruq ba, sizlarni itibasi boldu, öldürübesi boldu. Aştaq buyruq ba degan gaplarni qildi. Shuningga hayron qoldim, Uyg'urlarni rasmiy yo'q qilib bitish bir narsaligini aniq bilib ko'zim yetdi-ku, men shuning uchun shuningga mush kishilar qanday qaraydi deb o'ylayman. Qandaq bu nima uchun bizni shundaq yo'qotish, shundaq maqsad, u nima maqsad deb tushunolmayman shuning uchun. Burun bo'lmasa birga yashadik-ku, biz mashhad birga, hayron qolmay shuningga.
I was so surprised, and I was until I feel just to kind of I don't understand, and I even wish to hear from you and your opinion about, to me it's so clear, that the line was so clear already drawn between us and you. So the completely, we can hear clearly from the authorities, from the people who detain us, that they can kill you. I mean, we can kill you anytime. And it was so clear, already just kind of ordered to us. And then I didn't see any Chinese people inside the camps, non-Chinese. All of them Uyghurs and the Kazakhs. No other, just us. But whoever detained us, but they were just already so clear, saying that we can kill you whenever we want to. That's how the message was so clear. So I just don't understand, before we used to live together and we used to be all kind of thing. But after those going through in the camps, somehow they just felt, make us feel that something else, which is they just dehumanized us. So we had kind of feeling that, yes, we became something that we can be destroyed anytime. So my question is, I don't know why suddenly this big change and big shift of just division, you and me, you and us. That's what I have been experienced, because I have stayed for 3 years. over there, both inside the camps as well as outside. But that the line is clear that it's whether it's outside the camps or inside the camps, we will kind of target it, already meant to be destroyed.
Thank you.
Ahmed,
Ahmed.
thank you.
Tangbiao, since we are the hosts in a way for our class, I want to thank the students who have joined us. And I want to make sure that we send out in the chat some of the information that Zubaira, you shared as action items, and also to request that you could send those to me so that at least for this, I know there are many of you who are with us who are not in our course, very sadly. So if you're with us, please put in if you could type into the chat that action items. For those of you in Illinois, it seems like a very good thing to contact Congresswoman Duckworth and my brain just lost his name, Duckworth and Durbin. And I guess we might have some closing responses to what Tursane asked about what has made this possible, that maybe Tangbiao and Magnus have insight on, but we are coming to the end of our time, together. I will take one last scan through the questions and give Zubaira a chance to type into the chat for everyone to access the organizations that they should be following.
And Magnus, please go ahead.
Oh, can you repeat? Sorry.
I just, at the end of Torsene's comments, she noted like, why are we different now? What makes this possible? And I was wondering if, since you had done the reflection with the most specific unpacking of the relationship to programmatic genocide, if there's something to look at there that offers some kind of an answer about why, or whether, you know, whether or not the economic story of Belt and Road expansion is enough, or whether it's Han nationalism or the power of the CCP to harness Han nationalism.
Yeah.
I'm rephrasing Sunni's question about why, not nearly as eloquently as she phrased it, but maybe with some more concrete directions.
Yeah, I'd like to point to how there's been debate among Chinese officials and some academics for several decades about whether the entire system of ethnopolitics in China with the recognition of minorities should be preserved at all, or whether the minorities should be cancelled and abolished. And this actually is a long-standing issue in China, this tension between, do we want a unified country? Does that mean we cancel the minorities, or can they be allowed to exist? And the system now that's still formally on paper in place is one that was inspired by the Soviet Union. We recognize the existence of these other ethnicities. We pretend they have autonomy on paper, and there is some symbolic autonomy. The governor of Xinjiang has to be an Uyghur person, and so there's some aspects like that. So it's not zero. But now what it seems to me is that this debate has been won by ultra-nationalists that cannot tolerate the diversity and would like to see it erased and replaced with one nation, one people, a kind of setup. And I am very fearful that the next step is going to be the formal abolition of all the minorities, and that what we're seeing now is the beginning of that. we see how they preserve a kind of a tourist tokenism of the ethnic minorities, but that seems just such a fig leaf, implausible fig leaf approach. So I fear that there's been a turn to a kind of an extremist nationalism that is very deeply intolerant of cultural difference and that wants to impose Chineseness. And I think that I think is the bigger context. And then there are these other aspects that I think you're exactly right to point to the Belt and Road and so on, which are part of the reason why they're targeting this part of China first. But unfortunately, there's been this ideological shift. We know that the Communist Party doesn't talk about class struggle anymore. What they talk about is the glory of the empires of the past. They see themselves as the descendants to those empires. That's a major shift. It's a shift from the dogmas of communism to the dogmas of nationalism, unfortunately.
Yeah, I may add a few brief points. Firstly, it is out of the Chinese Communist Party's political calculation, and it wants to remain its one-party rule, and then they want to eliminate the identity of the Uyghur, Kazakh, Tibetan, and we recently read the news that the Chinese government is eliminating the language teaching, the Mongolia in the Mongolia and Tibetan. So this kind of a culture genocide is expanding to other autonomous regions, and then it is in the nature of the Chinese Communist Party. This year is the 100th year of the founding of CCP, and if we know a little bit of the history of CCP, it's quite common that for them to kill people. That millions of tens of millions of Chinese people had been killed by this party, and it is also the nature of the totalitarianism. It's kind of an inhumane system against the human nature, and then the Chinese government has practice. It's not suddenly appeared. Like since 1999, the camps targeting Falun Gong practitioners and also the Tibetans and of course in modern era the Gulag, the Laogai, the labor camps. So they have this kind of practice and in Nazi Germany, when Nazi started building those camps, it's not like killing several million Jews. It's for several years they didn't have that, but generally, gradually, they finalized their plan to kill millions of Jewish people, and then finally the international impunity. The Chinese Communist Party feel they won't be punished because it's the second largest economy as a permanent member of the Security Council, like that. So the international community is kind of not able to bring them to justice. That's one element too.
Absolutely. On our discussion board, we have a lot of observations about the futility of confronting China, the difficulty of confronting China given its position in the world. So Tongpiao, that observation doesn't answer the problem, but addresses the existence of the problem. We still have wonderful questions coming in, and unfortunately, I think there's a limit to how long we can keep our technical team on the call. we have a question that just came in again for I hope that this is a hopeful one, so maybe it's a nice place to end. This is again for Tursunet's, so I'll impose on Sabira to translate. This person writes, they're very grateful to hear from you today. I can hear and feel your strength through your voice and presence. I would love to hear what brings you joy and if she finds hope in Uyghur youth.
Nemi Tursunay deydiçip bugün meşeki keginiňizge sizdikiligi bir güçlüklik sizniki özüňki jasaratыңызga şu jasarat bilen kelip sizin bizde sözlegiňizde awazyňyzdan meşe turuşuňyzdan turkuňyzdan biz görüp durmuz. Sizge hoşallıklar yar boğay deydim. Hoşallıklar olsun.
Rahmet.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Zubeyre sual battı. Yaşlardan nemini küçsüz degendi.
Oh, sorry. What was the last one? I missed last part. Can you just repeat?
She wants to, the student wants to hear what brings Tursunet joy and if she finds hope in Uyghur youth.
Uyghur yaşlardan siz qandaq bir hoşallık ne ve yoki qandaq bir ümit ne körsiz yoki kütüsiz deyipti. Sualı şuke sizin.
Unda desem bek konum yerim buldu. Uyghur yaşları degende qaysi yaşlardan bunun dikinki aşı uyaqtı betinimde azap çıkıp atkan aşaqta yok bulup ketiş aldı turup atkan yaşlarımdan ümit kitmem bu çeteldiki hazır yaşap atkan. Endi nime ümit kitme desem buldu bilmeyme hazır unda desi fakat cevap beriş maň bek tas keldi. Ilmem men yana hazırkı yaşap atkan uyaqtiki yaşlarımga toktumay daydygynym. Özüniň aslyn unutup kalmaslygyny, ilemem bir Uygurlygyny, kaysarlyk bilen hemme ata-analarga şu baldaryň aşyny diýişini, ýani ýaşlagym daydygynym şu. Hiç kaçan meýli kançylyk ýokap ketdik, berber biz vatandakiler ölüp tügidi demey, ilemem ýani özüniň Uygurlygyny hiç kaçan unutup kalmay, ýaşaşyny ümit bilen ýaşaşyny ümit kılma.
Sorry.
Dep oýlaýmyn.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. I mean, if I miss anything, just remind me, chat, because good to have him here as well. I don't know, your question is, are you talking, when you're talking about Uyghur youth, whether you're talking about the Uyghur youth in East Turkestan or the Uyghur youth outside of the country. But if you talk about Uyghur youth inside the country, I feel extremely terribly sad because they are facing extinction. They are facing genocide. So I don't know what hope I can expect from them, for those young Uyghurs who facing extinction inside East Turkestan. But in terms of outside young people, outside of Uyghurs, I wish every parent to tell them, educate the children that never forget their identity as a Uyghur. They should be proud to keep our Uyghur identity and just to keep fight. That's what I would say. And that's what we have to stand firm on. So that's my hope from the young people. That's my hope from the Uyghur families to fight for our identity and keep our identity as a Uyghur.
And ahırkı bir gepim. Çokum aşı mening daýdygynym bunun dikin haqiqi bir halklarada toktumaymış bütün dünyada haqiqi Uygurny bir dünyaga tonutup biznimi bunun dikin kızlarni awlatlarynyň bunun dikin yaş kızlarnyň bunun dikin awlatlarynyň bundak bolup kalmaslygyga biz okşaş hem de aşak nabut kançylygan awlatlar başlar üçün çokum bir iş kılıp bunu toktutup haqiqi aşlarni bunun dikin hatırjam bir turmuş keçirdiganga haqiqi mana biz körüp atmyz muşu ýak kep körüp atmy haqiqi muşlara okşaş bir muşu döwletlerdikde hatırjam bir Uygurlar aşdak ýaşaýdygan bir günni kılış üçün bir iş kılışyny ümit kılma aşdak çokum haqiqi bir.
My last word to the world and the last word and the last request from the world is, I wish we Uyghurs also have a life that as you are having here, peaceful, wonderful, comfortable. one day I wish Uyghurs have that life too. I wish from world to make this happen, make this Uyghur dream to come true. I don't wish women, girls like myself to suffer what I have been through. I wish the world truly, actually, realistically stop what's happening to people like myself. And I wish any woman doesn't suffer as I have been. So we really wish one day, if anyone wants to help, I truly wish that they really take real action and then make change. And kind of, we Uyghurs also wish to live kind of life that I have witnessed in here, peaceful, peaceful and joyful. Thank you.
Ahırlaşsın bu zulüm, biz bile ahırlaşsın deyme. Şunu tileyme. Ahırlık ümit. Rahmet tileyim.
My last hope is whatever we have been through, this kind of cruelty should just end with us. I don't wish other people to, or other parts of the world to suffer. Thank you.
Thank you, Zubaira, Trisane, Tongbiao, Magnus, Ilsat, for what has been an incredibly stimulating, moving, challenging, difficult panel and call to action. Again, there are more questions pouring in than we could possibly answer. So reach out to people that you know, reach out to us, reach out to teachers, reach out to people to find out more about this, take action. And follow the human rights series. We will be coming back to the Uyghur question from a different angle when we deal with the question of US action in the Olympics at the end of May. So you will get, if you're on our list now, you could get an announcement about that. And we will have to talk to the folks at the Posen Center about making the video available, as we have some questions about that as well in the Q&A. Again, thank you to the Posen Center, our technical team that have kept us online this whole time, the History Department, and also the Center for East Asian Studies. And again, to all of you, especially to our Uyghur friends, but Magnus and Tongbiao as well. Thank you so much. And Tongbiao, it's just a pleasure teaching with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This goes for Ramadan.
Thank you.
Ramadan. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
谢谢童彪。
谢谢. Thank you. 谢谢. Yeah, thank you, Zubaira. Thank you to
And if the tech team can tell us when we're offline, it would be useful too.
yeah.
Bye bye.
Can we leave?
Bye-bye. Take care.